You've determined your niche, you've even sourced products, and maybe you already have a name in mind for your brand. This is one of the most frequently asked questions that I get. Kevin, does the name of my brand matter? What is a good name for my store? And what about the domain? Maybe you couldn't get the .com for your brand name, so do you have to change it? Is that a death sentence on me having any success if I don't have a .com URL? How do customers get to my website? So let's address these questions one by one. The name of a website is something that people spend way too much time thinking about. My advice is just to have fun with it and be creative. If you need inspiration, just look at some of the big brands in your niche and see what they're called. And forget about things like SEO, organics, or someone having to type out the URL of your website to get there. Because in the world of dropshipping, it'll be paid traffic that wins out. You're gonna pay for every visitor that comes onto your website, and as long as your website name and your URL doesn't scream scam, don't buy from me, you're gonna be in pretty good shape. And I've found that some of the most ridiculous names have worked before. So just make sure that you don't knock off the name of another business in the space, and that's the only rule I'll give you. So if some business out there is called Ralph's Hunting Gear, you better not call yourself Ralph's as well and sell hunting clothing. That's the only rule. So let's talk about domains. Don't worry about securing the perfect .com for your business. Again, no one is really going to be visiting your website by typing it into the browser. It's all going to be paid traffic. Plus, once someone does go onto your website once, they just have to type it out again, even the initial letters, and Google will autocomplete the rest of the URL. In fact, I've done tests on domains before just to answer this question for myself once and for all, and here are my insights. Just an example, let's assume that the dropshipping jewelry brand we're creating is called Gold Kings. So the first insight I'll give you is whether it's .com, .net, .org, or .shop, it doesn't matter. There is no reduction or improvement in conversion rate. GoldKings.shop or GoldKings.net works just as well in the eyes of consumers as GoldKings.com. The second insight I'll give you, whether there's a dash in between words, doesn't matter either. So gold-kings.com is just as good as goldkings.com with no dash at all. This is a hack that I use all the time when I don't get the domain that I initially wanted, but I still really like the name that I came up with. I just throw a dash in there. The third insight I'll share with you guys, adding additional words does not matter either. GoldKingsJewelry.com or GoldKingsShop.com or GoldKingsOnline.com. You can even throw in some more dashes and it still doesn't matter. Consumers will be able to get to your site through links that we direct via paid traffic. Again, all of Facebook ads is in the form of links or a button that you click that brings you onto the website. So URL doesn't really matter. So if the barrier preventing you from starting your dropshipping business is because you can't come up with a name or get the right domain, I want you to slap yourself silly right now and start taking the next step. With that said, let me teach you guys how to set up a domain for your website within Shopify. And just remember, this is one of the many ways to set up a domain. This is just the easiest through Shopify.
I've decided to pick the normal Shopify plan, not the basic one. Make sure you're off the free trial before you do this part, which is adding in the domain. Your screen should look like this. It shouldn't have that free trial box on top. And there's a lot of places where you can buy a domain from. There's GoDaddy, Namecheap, etc. The best place to get the domain for the easiest setup is gonna be on Shopify. It might be like $2 more expensive, and honestly it's way worth it given the amount of time you will save. So you just go to add domain over here, and if you don't see that prompt, it's always going to be under online store domain. So I'll go through it this way, and you got to click buy a new domain. So this is going to be a Shopify domain. This domain is given to you for free, but obviously you don't want to use this as a URL to send your customers. And this is also a way where you can always access this site no matter what, right? But we want to buy a legitimate domain, and here you just kind of pick domains that you want. So for the streetwear brand, I thought of a site called brand called Urban, let's just say Urban Brigade. and it might not be available. So what Shopify is doing now is kind of scanning, right? And it gives you all these other options. Remember from the lesson, doesn't matter if it's .net, .org, or .store. If you really want it to be .com, try putting a dash in between over here, because that doesn't matter as well. So again, $14 a year, totally worth it. I can go ahead and buy this. So whether it's urbanbrigade.net, .org, or it's .com with a dash inside, it really doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna go with this one. You just click buy. And your information at this point should already be saved based on the billing that you pick for your Shopify plan. You can make it auto renew this domain every year, or you can just make it so you have to renew it yourself. The danger of not renewing it automatically every year is if you forget to renew your domain, someone else could steal it. But no one's going to be stealing Urban-Brigade. At least I don't think so. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to go here and click buy domain. And my credit card should already be on file, so it just takes a little bit to load. Awesome. So I bought the domain. Everything's over here. Next thing, I just have to accept the email in order to verify my email address, because there's a law out there where every single domain has to be attached to like an identity, and email is enough to get that. So I'm just going to go into my email address, and it's whatever email you signed up with Shopify is going to be the one that you want to go to. So I'm just going to go to my email. Once I'm in here, click on this email and it's going to say this link. Just click right here. And it basically is going to ask me some questions to make sure that this domain can go live. So here it is, contact information. That is all correct. And if you don't do this step and verify your domain, they'll actually suspend the domain. You won't be able to use it. So I'd verify this information and bam, that's all that happened. So now essentially this is like a public registrar where if someone really needs to contact the domain owner, let's say like the government, God forbid that ever happens, this is legitimate information. So don't just BS the email at this point. You got to make sure you're actually checking this email. And I recommend in previous lesson to have one email for all of your sort of Shopify, AliExpress apps. That's kind of like your business email separate from personal. And now that we verified this, I'm going to go back to this screen and it should register that everything has been set. So 1 second. Yep. You have to go back to your email actually if you don't see that it's been verified, and do another data use consent preferences. And this one is really important. So I come onto here, and this means that this Inc. can share following data with registry service providers, right? So if you want to keep this information private, your name, your email, etc., especially private from like your average person that could find out who runs the site, you just save the consent settings without consenting to all of the above. So I'm not going to be consenting to any information released, and you don't have to consent either. And bam, it's all set up. I'm going to refresh over here. And it takes some time, maybe like 30 minutes sometimes for this domain to kick in. But all you have to do is just copy and paste this over here, and it should be working. So yep, it is working because it's directing to this site, which is what is gonna show before you actually start designing your website. So don't worry about this. As long as you can see this page over here and best course test is corresponding to the site or the Shopify that you actually made, then this is all you had to do. Your domain is set up, and that's gonna be the new domain or URL for your business.